Hi, and welcome back to this briefing around Centrify on-premise SSO for Unix, Linux, and Macs. In the previous video, we talked about how Centrify provides centralized administration, streamlined authentication, policy enforcement, configuration management, and end-to-end auditing. Now we're going to talk about direct integration, right? So, at the basic level, once a machine is integrated to AD via Centrify, several things happen. One of them is that we enable the name service switch and pluggable authentication modules to work seamlessly with AD. This is via providing authentication with Kerberos. That gives a lot of possibilities for applications like this one's right here, because they can either use direct integration via PAM or NSS, SASL, our LDAP proxy, which is really popular, or Kerberos or GSS API integration, right? So I think in the previous video, I showed you a little bit of Kerberos SSO. That's possible today. Modern versions of SSH already come compiled for PAM and provide support for GSS API and Kerberos. However, Centrify had its own version of OpenSSH for years just to accommodate older Unix and Linux platforms that did not have this capability. Something really that you should not overlook is the fact that Centrify has worked really hard to make Kerberos work with Microsoft extensions, Microsoft Kyle. Those are Kerberos extensions for that Microsoft provides. And the biggest example should be to provide access via OneWay Trust. Because I'm going to show you an environment that I have, my Contoso environment, right? And I am sitting at the Fabricam domain that has an external one-way trust to the core Contoso domain. What that means, based on the directional trust, because Fabricam trusts Contoso, accounts from Contoso can access resources in Fabricam. That's the main principle. A lot of the solutions out today, they don't provide very robust access. In my case here, I'm logged in as Jerry. Jerry is a user from Contoso. And if Jerry wanted to use, for example, a login application like SSH, his experience will be the same regardless, right? So he will get Kerberos SSO, and in this case, it's an outgoing one-way trust. Um, you know, no problem. This is great for productivity, and a lot of people don't do the due diligence to test this, right? With Centrify, you have a lot of tools like adinfo-y domain. That's going to show you the map of the domain, and you can see in here that we are in the Fabricam domain, but we have a one-way trust towards the Contoso domain, right? Let's talk about another scenario, right? And this is direct integration using PAM for something like like a database. In this case, Oracle, right? So what happens today? Oracle supports the concept of externally identified users, right? Although it's not their best practice, we can enable, because we enable Kerberos out of the box, and if you want to use PAM or NSS, users like, for example, Diana here, she could do something like SQL plus / and she'll be able to log in as herself if I do a show user, and she's an external identified user. At the same time, we provide, because we enable Kerberos, if you have Oracle with the advanced security option or the user security option, we provide white papers for integration. I'm going to make a caveat here. When it comes to Oracle, a lot of people think about Oracle application servers like WebLogic. We do provide plugins for WebLogic, but Oracle does support federation, and that's the direction that you should be going. Also, many of your applications are developed with users identified internally already, so you have to talk to Oracle for that. Their APIs are closed. The other scenario that I wanted to go through is MongoDB. I have another environment. I have a lot of environments. So the same environment that I showed you before, I have MongoDB running, and I have a user called J. Peterman. So J. Peterman does have the ability to log out to MongoDB, and in this case, this is going to be a straight Kerberos integration, right? So I can log into Cent3 as J. Peterman, and I'm going to be prompted by my AD password. In this case, I didn't do SSO, but I can launch MongoDB in Kerberos mode. So it's Mongo and send.corp.contoso.com, and I'm not even going to okay, let's see, send3, of course, learn how to type. So I already have it here from before, and again, the important thing is to do a K-list, so to know if you have, if you have a Kerberos ticket. I think I have the command here. And notice that the user has a ticket, right? So if I wanted to open Mongo in the proper mode, I'll be able to log in. I'm not even going to pretend to be a MongoDB expert, but to test it, I'm going to issue a MongoDB command. If I get a 0, that's failed. If I get a 1, that means it worked. So in here, this is to test the GSS API. In this case, we're using Kerberos, but via GSS API. And you'll notice that I'm going to get a 1, which means it was correct, right? So, so far, OneWay Trust support, um, PAM and NSS support, now Kerberos support. But what really excels is, for example, in big data, right? And now we're going to go to the big data lab that we have at Centrify. In this case, I'm gonna use MapR, for example. A data scientist, may want, because all those jobs are run through the CLI, you want to be able to make their life easier, right? So they can log in no problem. In here, if I do a kill list, let's see if I have a ticket. Notice that the expiration here, ended. So Centrify provides GPOs that allow you to enable eternal or infinite ticket renewal. That makes sure that Hadoop jobs that are going to last for days are not going to fail because 10 hours passed and it's not going to work. So in my case, I'm going to do a kinit, and I'm going to re-authenticate again. In this case now, because we're doing MapR, I can do something like MapR login, Kerberos, and that way I'm authenticated to MapR. And if I need to run a job, let's see, I could just do Hadoop jar and then Hadoop map reduce examples. Let's do pi with 5 maps and 10 samples. So that's going to run that job in that Hadoop cluster. And the benefits to me are that I can continue to centralize the administration. People, the clusters are secured. I can meet my regulatory requirements, and I can have Hadoop aligned the right way, because often Hadoop, is used for personal data, card data, and all that stuff. I told you about the proxies, right? So sometimes we need to provide an LDAP interface to AD, right? But applications think that AD is this flat construct. No. You have Active Directory sites and services. You have all the things, right? So that's where we provide the proxies, right? So we have a NIS and an LDAP proxy. And ultimately what happens is, because we're sites and services aware, because we have cache, we treat domain controllers nicely, and we can expose LDAP interfaces to applications like Couchbase, right? So one of the things that I did in that same environment is that I have a Couchbase environment, and I have enabled LDAP from Couchbase, and I'm going through the LDAP proxy to show you right here. The LDAP proxy, I started with this command. I didn't automate it, so it's basically exposing LDAP interfaces. And in this case, I'm doing it unsecurely. You would probably want to do it with the secure mode, but this is just a demo. But in here, what I make sure is that, for example, Jerry, it's a user that I have in this environment, and Jerry should be able to authenticate to Couchbase. Notice that he is a read-only administrator, right? And if somebody else needed access, I'm going to go ahead and sign out. I think George. And George should be able to log in, no problem, and he's a full administrator. But the benefit here is that users don't necessarily have to be Unix enabled to use the LDAP proxy. Typically, you would see a user, and when you look at the Centrify profile, you would see that they have login, UID, GID, and all that stuff, right? In this case, he doesn't have. In the case of Jerry, who had access as a read-only administrator, he's just a regular AD guy. Well, actually, no, he is enabled, but what that means, we have the flexibility that we can, through the LDAP proxy, allow access to applications for non-Unix enabled users or Unix enabled users, depending on the filter. So bottom line, you have a lot of avenues for direct integration for SSO and common credentials using Centrify. And I showed you a little bit of OneWay Trust. I showed you a little bit of Oracle via PAM, showed you some MongoDB using Kerberos, a little bit of Hadoop using Kerberos as well, and finally the LDAP proxy for Couchbase. Next, we're going to talk about the plugins, and we're going to see how we can help you with Apache, Java servers, as well as DB2. I don't have SAP to show you, but I'll do it later some other time.